I'm Brian Robert Oliver. This is the Infinite Eleven's Anatomy of Horror, a video series that highlights the best of the horror genre, both past and present. We break down parts of films, analyzing it piece by piece to demystify the art of the filmmaking process. Tonight, we're going to be talking about possibly the most iconic horror film of all time, The Exorcist. Now, this is our second video about this film, and this time, we're going to talk about one of the most infamous scenes in film history, the Crucifix scene, and that's coming up next. So, you've seen the movie, and you know the scene. In a film of standout scenes, this one stands out. And since we've already done a video about The Exorcist, I'll spare you the synopsis. Now, there are quite a few implicit meanings to the film, or metaphorical meanings, and I've mentioned them in the previous videos. Themes such as crisis of faith and fear of the matriarchy. But another theme and implicit meaning, one that we'll be discussing, is coming of age. Yes, as strange as it sounds, The Exorcist is a coming of age film to a certain degree. After establishing who Chris is and what she does, we are introduced to the relationship between the mother Chris and the 13-year-old daughter Regan. These two characters share a deep and warm affection for one another. Chris is busy, but she's attentive. Regan is innocent, open, and honest. However, an ancient demon claiming to be the devil takes control of Regan, and the once sweet child is now a foul-mouthed, snot-fueled, evil demon, otherwise known by some parents as a teenager. There are two separate narratives that eventually intersect, the possession of Regan being the first one, and Father Karras's loss of faith being the second. The Crucifix scene serves as a sort of climax that wraps up the first act for both Chris and Regan. And less than a quarter of a way through the film, William Friedkin, the director, starts building a bridge for us to get to that scene. And the journey is an absolute masterclass in telling a story on film. We start with the scene where Chris wakes up in the middle of the night to find Regan laying in the bed next to her. Now, the bed is a major motif for Regan in this film, a motif being a visual pattern associated with a character or theme. And since this narrative involves coming of age, the bed represents sexuality and change. The first sign of change, and in this instance, it's Regan's bed shaking, she runs to her mother for support, but realizes this problem might be too big for Chris to fix. Then, during a killer party thrown by Chris, and in front of all of her friends, Regan pees on the floor. This serves two purposes. It's both infantile as well as defiant. So what we are seeing is the end of childhood and the beginning of puberty. Now we get to this shot right here, and though it may not look like it, it is really important. This is what they mean when they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. First, notice the composition and framing, the way in which we see our two characters. Regan is pretty close to center frame, and your eyes are drawn directly to both she and Chris. Chris's blocking and shape resembles a mother mourning, and she is, mourning the loss of her sweet daughter. Regan is upright and stiff, traumatized and despondent because of the severe changes within herself. And the angle at which we see them is slightly higher, giving the sensation of pressure as if the world was weighing heavy upon them. Also, look at the soap dish directly above Regan's head. Is it me, or does it resemble the mouth of Pazuzu seen during the prologue with Father Merrin in Iraq? That's so subtle and really cool. Notice Regan's robe. It's pink, a symbol associated with young girls, but notice how it's crumpled on the floor as if to say that she is a child no more. And look at this frame within a frame. These two are boxed within the door frame, giving the shot an extra layer of voyeuristic objectivity, but also makes it more of an intimate portrait of a mother and her daughter. Now, the lighting, and this is important. The light in the bathroom is harsh and realistic, and that is juxtaposed against the warm light of the outside room, which is telling an entirely different story. And this is what is considered deep focus, meaning everything is in focus in the shot on a wide-angle lens, and that's because everything outside of the bathroom is equally as important. Notice frame left and the interesting stuff that we've got going on here. Two toys representing Regan's childhood, one toy blue and the other pink, just like the colors dominating the inside of the bathroom. Above that, we have a fish tank, and of course, it's full of water, much like the bathtub Regan sits in. And the color of the water is really important. It's violet, or somewhere between blue and red, and that is what's going on in this scene. Regan is caught between childhood and womanhood. We have this warm, gentle setting. It's safe and calming, like the joyful memory of how it used to be, but center frame is harsh and mournful, and of course, frame right, we have the bed. So this is when a really interesting pattern begins regarding the bed motif. After tucking Reagan in, Chris hears her daughter scream. And then we have this right here. We know there is something going on in Reagan's room, and the previous scene was shot with immediacy. But Friedkin shows us Chris's reaction before showing us what's going on, and this works so well. This is a close-up, and for good reason. Friedkin has decided that Chris's reaction is the most important thing we can see. Take note of the angle. It's slightly lower in regards to the bed, and because Chris is the mother, the angle gives her authority. And we have the shallow focus to emphasize how important this is. Now watch this. Again, the importance is placed on the reaction of these characters when they see what's going on with this kid in her bed. And like the previous scene, Reagan is not in control and she is distress. This thing that is happening to her. She doesn't like it. Chris doesn't like it. Nobody likes it. And this is all to set this up right here.
You know what she did? Your daughter?
So, apologies for the heavy edits. This scene is pretty intense. So the first thing we see is a point of view shot, which is meant to be the eyes of Chris, which is super subjective. And what do we see? We see Reagan's belongings flung through the air, mini records, a tennis ball, a toy racket, representations of Reagan's childhood and her newfound disregard for it. And just like before in the scene where Reagan's bed is shaking, we see Chris first, and it's an awesome shot by answering a subjective shot with another very subjective shot, keeping us locked into Chris's experience. Its angle is neutral, not a low angle as the previous two scenes we discussed were, but it's very similar. Look at how shallow the focus is, shot with a longer lens and only Chris is in focus because her reaction is paramount to the scene. Notice the curtains and how they obstruct her eyes. It's as if to say, you don't want to see this, Chris. And I love this. We know what's going on here and we know what Reagan is doing, but the way in which it's shot, its pacing, it plays out like a mother bursting in on her daughter as she is masturbating. If this were another movie, not a horror film, but another coming-of-age film, a mother burst into the room unannounced as her daughter was playing with herself, it could easily be shot this way. So now we see Chris's reaction to what she sees and the payoff. But we don't get paid off all at once. This scene is shocking, and Friedkin instinctually gives it to us bit by bit. So we start with a close-up, shallow focus shot of Reagan's hand holding onto the bloody crucifix, and then it leaves the shot empty for a quick second and right into this. Yikes. But the timing is perfect, and again, this is the pattern used. These quick, shallow close-ups of the action, and then we get to see Reagan, and now we can start to fully realize what makes this scene so good. Reagan is really violating herself, but we are seeing her face in the scene for the very first time, and it's unsettling. This is, so far, the most drastic physical transformation for Reagan. She no longer looks like herself. She looks more like a monster. She's menacing. She's covered in blood, cuts on her face, and this is such a brilliant way to introduce this. And it's in keeping with the pattern established on these close-up tight shots with shallow focus. And then the thrust off camera, that sound, the wincing, this is so uncomfortable. We cut back to Chris in that same tight shot, and this is why this scene is so intense. All of these close-ups, and then she leaves the frame and right into another tight shot, and again, the focus is shallow, keeping us completely engaged with the characters. This shot is chaotic. The previous shots were all static, and now not only are the characters in on the action, but so is the camera. Again, it's a tight shot, and it keeps us close to the action and therefore adds intensity. Now we answer this over-the-shoulder shot with another over-the-shoulder shot, but now we are given a little bit of space to see the action better, and now we have a new pattern, cutting back and forth between the over-the-shoulder close-up of Reagan and the over-the-shoulder medium shot of Chris. The cutting back and forth is awesome. It keeps getting us in the middle of the struggle and keeps us unsteady and involved, and then pulling back briefly so we can see what's going on. One shot of the pattern, this one, is subjective. That means we are close enough to the characters to give the audience the point of view of a character. The other shot is more objective, where we are far enough away from the characters like a fly on the wall. Watching it but not involved and being able to mix the subjective with the objective well is the mark of a good filmmaker. And then this right here. We push in and now we are close on Chris. Then she leaves the frame because, well, you know. But you can see why this style and this pattern is so effective. We are right there, and this scene is from Chris's point of view, most of it. So we need to stay close to the action and close to the characters. It's a really personal scene. And this is just rude though. More of the tight focus and the shakiness adds to the chaos. Now, this is how we break the pattern of the cutting back and forth. Another point of view shot, and then right back into this super close-up, personal, subjective shot. Another point of view shot. And now we're about to see the angle at which we see Chris change and onto the first objective-ish shot, and we're about to see why. I still love this shot. The previous shot of Chris crawling to the door was a wide shot to break up the pattern of close-ups, and then we answered that with this infamous shot. It's wide, slightly objective because we need to see this, and it's terrible enough that it can still be effective even in such a personal scene. We see Reagan's head do a 180, and that's because Reagan's personality is the exact opposite of what it once was. Essentially, she is someone or something else, and this is powerful. It's a close-up of Chris to take us back to the subjective, but it's an over-the-shoulder and what is known as making the shot a little dirty. It's when you're focusing on a subject, but a part of the character that they are speaking to shows up in the shot. The shot is tight and the focus still super shallow, and notice the angle here. Like the previous scenes when we are looking up at Chris when she is in Reagan's room, now you're looking down at her. So Friedkin gets a piece of Reagan in the shot to show this is how she sees her mother now. Chris is no longer respected as an adult. And of course, now we see that Reagan is shot from a lower angle, giving her the power and status in the shot. Such an iconic film and iconic scene. And if you really want to deep dive into this film, then I suggest checking out Rob Eger's channel, Collative Learning, as well as Ryan Hollinger. The Exorcist was written by William Blatty, directed by William Friedkin. It stars Ellen Burstyn, Linda Blair, Jason Miller, and Max von Sydow. Until next time.